She was a bag of decomposing body parts. She was an autopsy subject. She was a collection of limbs that had been severed from each other. But this afternoon, she became human again, as we heard about these photos and saw some images that, of course, were not child sexual abuse material that could be shown to the court. We saw Celeste at age 13 with what appeared to be a diamond engagement ring on her left ring finger. That's the finger that had David's name tattooed on it in red ink. We saw photos of the two of them kissing and cuddling in bed. We saw selfies of the two of them. Celeste with her red hair in the front seat of his Tesla. What prosecutors are doing right now, I think, is painting a picture of the nature of their relationship, just how much time they spent together, what they discussed, the future they talked about planning together. Here's what struck me. Here was my big takeaway walking out of the courtroom today. Previously, we heard the relationship characterized as maybe one-sided, right? It sounded like Celeste, this teenager, was pushing for more, and she was jealous of David's relationships with other women. So the text messages that were read aloud and shown to us in court today actually flip that narrative. That surprised me. I was not expecting that during testimony today. But it sounds like David is actually the one who brought up moving in together, spending more time together, a wedding, again, to this child. She was 13 at the time many of these conversations were documented. Having kids. He states in a text message to Celeste's number that they want 2 kids. And this came out as well. We have previously heard references to abortion and the Plan B morning after pill in their text message exchanges. But today we actually saw messages discussing an abortion appointment for Celeste in January of 2024. Now, do the math there. Her birthday was September of 2010. She was 13 when this purported abortion took place. Where we just wrapped court this afternoon, we were looking at text messages where Celeste is now expressing regret, telling David over text that she would do anything to take that back.
And that was to your point about it just kind of today, you're hearing Celeste in her own words for the first time. And we knew that the relationship was intimate. We knew that the relationship had all these different elements to it that led to a charge of child sex abuse that he's facing. But to hear
I think it's because this is actually the first time during the course of this preliminary hearing where Celeste is being presented as a living human. A young girl who is very much alive, a young girl who has a voice, who is expressing her feelings, her wants, her needs. Before this, she was a bag of decomposing body parts. Until that afternoon, she had been remains in cadaver bags. Then the texts restored her voice. She expresses regret over the abortion. She tells him she would do anything to take it back.
Against the rising music star. Joining us now once again, Julia Dang from NBC LA, a reporter who's in the courtroom for day 4 of this preliminary hearing. Julia, this afternoon, a lot of focus on text messages between David and Celeste. Walk us through what I know was a very emotional final part of the day here.
Chris, a lot of damning evidence today as it relates to not the murder charge, but another felony charge in this case against David Anthony Burke. It's the felony count of continuous sexual abuse of a child under 14. Of course, they're talking about the murder case, 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. So we've heard descriptions of this digital evidence before. We've seen this in charging documents. We've reported on this. Prosecutors have described photos they found in David's iCloud account on his devices. They've described text messages between the two of them referencing sexual activity and things like abortion, emergency contraception. Today in court, during day 4 of this preliminary hearing, we actually got to see and read some of those text messages. Now, we did not see any explicit photos because that, of course, is child sexual abuse material. We did hear from another LAPD detective who took the stand, Corey Farell, and he was charged with looking at those photos on sheets of printer paper the prosecutor handed him, and then describing verbally for the court what he saw. And Chris, I gotta tell you, there's been a lot of distressing, disturbing, graphic evidence.
That's also the time period where we saw text message conversations today in court showing that David and Celeste were talking about something called OA, Operation Awesome, where they were plotting her departure, her runaway from her home in Lake Elsinore. And this struck me too. David appears to be the one pushing this. He's the one who keeps on asking her, "Do you have your bags packed?" He tells her, "Bring everything you're going to use that I can't immediately replace." The gap between the private messages and the public performance is the case's sharpest edge. One version of David is planning a future with a child. The other version is a stranger to the responding officers. That is not ambiguity. That is evidence of calculation.
Reported abortion took place. Where we just wrapped court this afternoon, we were looking at text messages where Celeste is now expressing regret, telling David over text that she would do anything to take that back.
And that was to your point about it just kind of today, you're hearing Celeste in her own words for the first time. And we knew that
And the text you have here, this is from March 2025. So this is roughly a month, maybe 2 months before she passes away. And Celeste appears to be the one trying to move on post-breakup. She says she is okay with staying friends, but she doesn't want to be connected online. She isn't interested in continuing to have sex with him. And the quote from that text is without a label, which sounds way more of a casual kind of level-headed approach to their situation as to what maybe we thought ahead of time. By March 2025, the child is the one cooling the relationship. The adult is the one who earlier
she is, he's eating some chips, he's very casual about it. And it just, for as much as there's this kind of now dynamic we understand of the relationship through the text messages, I think it makes that body cam video look way more damning and kind of shows just how much he was allegedly misleading police at that point in time and acting like he didn't really know who she was, when clearly these text messages show that this relationship was at a very serious level.
Absolutely, Chris. I think it also paints a great picture of just how convincing David can be as a liar. Because when that body cam recording was taken in February of 2024, that's also the time period where we saw text message conversations today.
But today, as they were talking about the photos found on his phone and the text messages recovered from his iCloud account, I did notice him hunching over and starting to jot something down. I did notice him having whispered conversations with his attorneys at one point. This was when, and this was really tough. This was actually what prompted the victim's mother to start crying and both of her parents to walk out of the courtroom flanked by their attorney. For the first time in the hearing, the defendant writes on the yellow pad. His leg jiggles. He shrinks in the seat. The parents leave when the descriptions turn explicit. The stoic posture cracks only when the evidence turns personal.
And I believe it was the day before Valentine's Day in 2024. He calls it the most important day of her life, aside from their anticipated wedding. Again, at this time, she is only 13 years old. This is just a couple weeks after, memorialized in these text messages, she apparently had an abortion. And the prosecutor made sure to have the LAPD detective presenting this evidence read messages from Celeste to David confirming that it is his child.
And just because I'm looking at the notes here that you sent over today, and this was right before court.
So, Dr. Grant Ho, the LA County Deputy Medical Examiner, spent quite a bit of time today describing the injuries he found, describing how the penetrating wounds to the overlaying skin are associated with internal damage found inside. That includes damage to the victim's liver, He described how he used his own fingers to palpate her ribs, how he found damage or disruptions to that underlying bone, how that sits right beneath a second penetrating wound that he found on her left flank. Toxicology ruled out overdose. The findings waited months for confirmation. The examiner, a fellow at the time, worked with a trainee.
Part of it. I mean, we're explaining very, very explicit images that were on his phone, very personal text messages now for the world to see. What was he doing during that part of it?
This was interesting, too. This was actually the first instance, Chris, during this preliminary hearing where it seemed to me like David was actively engaged in his own defense. Today was the first time I actually noticed him using the pen or pencil in front of him and that yellow legal notepad that I keep on peeking at, trying to see if he's taking any notes. Before today, I haven't seen him writing anything down, and I've got an eye on him at all times just to see how he's reacting to what's being said about him, his actions. Nothing before today, not a single thing written down. But today, as they were talking about the photos found on his phone and the text messages recovered from his iCloud account, I did notice him hunching over and starting to jot something down. I did notice him having whispered conversations with his attorneys. At one point, this was when, and this was really tough. This was actually what prompted the victim's mother to start crying and both of her parents to walk out of the courtroom, flanked by their attorney. But when they were describing the incredibly explicit images of David and Celeste engaged in various types of sexual activity found on David's phone, I noticed David losing his composure a little bit. The entire time that I've been watching him in court during this hearing and the status conferences before this, he has been very still, very composed, staring straight ahead, responding when spoken to, and not giving away much with his body language or his facial expressions. Today, when they were talking about the photos, when they were talking about his pics, you could see him starting to fidget. It was like he was shrinking in his seat. He looked out at one point. I could see his right leg jiggling up and down. And I'm really curious what he wrote down. Really curious what he shared with his attorneys during that exchange. Because it wasn't just one photo or two that LAPD Detective Corey Farell described on the stand. It was a series of photos, probably dozens. You know, it got to a point where there were so many descriptions. They were so explicit. You can see in my notes, Chris, I actually stopped describing them one by one. And I just started grouping them into categories, you know, of genitalia, the two of them engaging in sexual intercourse. The list goes on and on. That portion of testimony went on for much longer than I expected it to. We have not even gotten to cross-examination of this witness yet.
It's an interesting observation that, because for as graphic as the images have been shown on the screen, I mean, here's Celeste, and then you think of